So on NPR, they were talking about how the protests from last week. There was a protest against Donald Trump visiting here in California, specifically in the Orange County area, and um, and they got out of hand. Uh, some of the protesters were rowdy. They were pushing pushing one of the police vehicles, and they were waving the Mexican flag. And the question came up was whether protesting with the Mexican flag help the cause, or does it benefit Donald Trump and the supporters?
Was that
Um,
question raised by like you having casual conversations with other people, or was it raised by the
no,
news
it
anchors?
was an NPR. It was a question that was raised, and it was actually a question that, and the reason that I gravitated to that scenario, that question was because I don't know exactly how I feel about about it. I didn't. I definitely see how some Trump supporters would um, argue that there's further proof that there's Mexicans and being rowdy and all the negative stuff that goes with that. Um,
And that they're not respecting this country, right?
exactly, and that's part of it too. That's a very important part. On the other hand, um, it's something that especially here in Southern California that it's used a lot, especially when we talk about immigration and equality. The Mexican flag is raised, and I've raised it myself during protests, and it's primarily because just respect of the heritage, of course, um, and, uh, and the fact that that we are Mexican Americans, and it's very important to distinguish ourselves. But again, I have mixed feelings, and I wanted to get some of you guys' input. See what you guys think and how you guys feel about the situation.
I think that's an interesting subject because we can tie it into to a whole bunch of other situations like that you mentioned, Mexicans perpetuating this stereotype that certain people already want to promote to make it
Hmm.
seem like Mexicans are ungrateful, that they come here, that they don't assimilate.
I understand that there's some Trump followers that see all the chaos and the and the Mexican flags and just reinforces their stereotypes and their beliefs in Donald Trump's message. Um, and I also see the importance of raising the Mexican flag, especially here in Southern California, where there's so many Mexican Americans that live here and identified as Mexican Americans and identify with Mexican culture as well as American culture. Um, and it's often used, especially when there's protests um, that they're specific to immigrant rights and just human rights here in Southern California. And I wanted to get some of your perspective, you guys' perspective, and feelings behind, should we should we continue to use the Mexican flag in protest?
Oh man, that's a tough one, isn't it? I mean, everybody has the right to do what they want, but I think when it comes to immigration issues or immigration protests, it is inappropriate to use it. I mean, it goes against the basis of what they're trying to achieve. You know,
Hmm.
because they're trying to be whenever there's an immigration protest that's calling for immigration reform or the like, uh, it's not pertinent to that specific issue to to embrace that nationality when you're advocating for wanting to belong to the U.S. to the USA. You know, if anything, you should have the USA flag.
Hmm.
But I think with the Trump issue, it's a little different because he has called out Mexicans in particular. He singled
Hmm.
them out, and
Hmm.
and so in this case, it was just it fits into the whole narrative.
it becomes a symbol of opposition to Trump. So the flag carries on a little bit more than just
it has more significance in this case.
right.
Yeah.
The problem is that a lot of people in this country have been conditioned over the years to interpret people like that in a certain way, specifically sometimes by the media, and sometimes it's just natural because you do see it a lot. You do see, for example, you've seen the games between Mexico and the U.S. when the soccer teams play,
Right.
and I don't know if you remember that game a long time ago here at the LA Coliseum where the Mexicans booed the U.S. national anthem. And I think for a lot of people, whenever they start seeing Mexicans behaving that way, it to them they see it as it's very negative, and I think
disrespectful.
And so my major concern would be that as soon as you put yourself in a position where someone can pretty much you give them the tools to call you out,
to attack you,
and to discredit your argument, then you no longer, you lose a little bit of leverage, because you're like playing into their hands, and so I think that's the difficulty, because not a lot of people are going to be able to make that distinction and say, okay, in certain situations it's inappropriate, like booing the U.S. national anthem during the soccer game,
or any anthem at that case,
right?
Yeah.
And waving the Mexican flag, maybe when you're like fighting for immigration rights, maybe in that case it's still a bit of a gray area. But in the case of Trump, it's making a statement because he did call out Mexicans in particular. So I don't know if some people will, but they'll just, whoever wants to keep attacking, especially if Trump wants to pick up on that, then he'll be able to use it to see, I told you, they come to this country, they don't assimilate, they don't like us, blah blah blah. So why should we even like be nice to them?
And you guys mentioned a lot of good things, like and I have to say that when especially during protests, when the Mexican flag is waved, it's usually accompanied by the U.S. flag. So it's not like, it's only Mexican flag. And I've seen other flags around the world. I've seen Argentinian flags. I've seen Salvadorian flags as well, and Guatemalan flags. So it's not just one flag from Latin America. But there is this, and I think I find it interesting that there is this tone that is projected, especially from the Republican Party, that any group that comes here must assimilate, and assimilation, actually it's a natural thing, something that's not forced, and it's actually, and it falls like other constructs. It falls in a spectrum where you just don't assimilate right away or 100%, or it's not uniform. It's again, it's in the spectrum, and it takes time because with assimilation of any group, and that goes and it travels across multiple type of cultures. It's that as the person is assimilating, they're also letting go a little bit of their country that they came from. And there's a grief process that is often not talked about. But what this whole tone that people must learn English and must adopt American issues and must raise the American flag and so forth. It's dismissive of the culture of that one individual. I think.
Well, but having said that, I mean, there is a national language and there is a national culture, if you can call it that, and as a Mexican American, to be honest with you, I kind of agree with that requirement or that demand that if you're going to be allowed to be in this country legally, that you should display some of those aspects of what is considered to be the American experience. I think that's valid. Obviously, you don't have to become 100% American, if that's a thing, but you should at least have some basics.
Yeah,
I think I can agree with that.
There's So, for example, let's bring up the Irish and St. Patrick's Day, right? Because they get their day when they get to celebrate it, and there's still pride in that group, in the communities that are predominantly Irish. They come out with the flags and they're proud of their culture.
Yeah.
I think it's really hard to compare Mexicans to the Irish, because it's really hard to compare Mexicans to really any other group that has immigrated to the United States, because for the most part, those other groups are no longer coming in masse.
Yeah.
And so the problem with Mexican Americans is that we are assimilating. Whether or not the Mexicans want to assimilate, they do, because even if the first generation doesn't want to assimilate, the second generation does.